Jack Callahan had always believed that the world was a place where a man had to keep moving. He grew up in the open country where the wind was strong, the land was wide, and life was not easy. His father had been a ranch hand, and Jack had learned how to ride a horse almost as soon as he could walk. By the time he was 15, he knew how to track a rider by the shape of hoof prints and how to read the sky like a map. The world outside was his home and the stars above were his ceiling. Jack never expected his life to be filled with gentle things. For him, the land had always been about work, dust, and the sound of hooves on dry ground. Over the years, he had worked as a cowboy, a cattle driver, and sometimes as a tracker. But when a few bad men started causing trouble in towns nearby, Jack began to work as a bounty hunter. He did not do it for fame or glory. He did it because he believed that the land should be safe for honest people to live on. That summer morning, the air was warm but soft, and the sun was still climbing its way up into the sky. Jack packed his saddlebag, checked the straps on his horse, and started his journey toward the San Pedro River. He had heard that a group of men had taken what didn't belong to them and disappeared into the lands ahead. His job was to follow their trail, find them, and bring them back to face the law. The open land stretched in every direction like a painting. The ground was dusty, but here and there wildflowers grew with quiet strength. A soft wind brushed against his face, carrying the faint scent of water and sagebrush. His horse, a strong chestnut named Dusty, moved steadily, its hooves beating a slow rhythm on the earth. Jack liked traveling early in the day when the world was still quiet. It gave him time to think. Though Jack's life looked calm on the outside, inside his heart was different. For many years he had lived alone, traveling from one place to another. He had seen faces come and go, towns rise and fall, but he had never found a place or a person that made him want to stay. He told himself that was fine. A man like him didn't need such things. But sometimes, late at night, when the campfire burned low and the sky was full of stars, a quiet thought would settle in the back of his mind, a thought he never said out loud. It whispered that maybe, just maybe, there was more to life than the road. The trail grew harder as the day went on. The prints on the ground became less clear, and the trees stood taller as he rode deeper into Apache lands. Jack had been here once before, many years ago. He knew this was a place that demanded respect. The air here carried stories. He could almost feel them, soft whispers in the wind, the weight of footsteps from people who had lived on this land long before he was born. As he guided Dusty down a narrow path between tall rocks, Jack slowed down. He listened. One thing he had learned over the years was to trust silence. When the world became too quiet, it often meant something important was near. A bird's wings cut across the blue sky. A small lizard crawled across a warm stone, but aside from that there was nothing else, not even the sound of other horses. When Jack reached the riverbank, he decided to rest for a while. The San Pedro River flowed gently, its water glimmering under the sun. Cottonwood trees grew tall along the edges, their leaves moving softly in the wind. Jack got down from his horse, tied the reins to a branch, and bent down to touch the cool water. It felt fresh against his warm skin. For a moment, everything felt calm, peaceful. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw movement. Jack slowly turned his head. He was careful not to make any sudden noise. Just across the shallow part of the river stood a woman. She was barefoot, standing in the water as if the earth belonged to her. Her long black hair fell freely down her back, shining in the sunlight like a river of its own. She wore a simple dress made from soft fabric, tied around her waist with a strip of leather. Her posture was straight, calm, and proud, like someone who was not afraid of the world. Her name, though Jack did not know it yet, was Ayanna. Ayanna lifted her head and looked straight at him. Her eyes were deep and steady, not wild or frightened. Jack felt something strange in that moment, something he hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't fear. It wasn't danger. It was the quiet weight of being seen. Not as a stranger on a horse, but as a man standing on the riverbank breathing the same air. For a few seconds, neither of them moved. The only sound between them was the soft ripple of the water and the wind brushing through the trees. Jack could tell she was from the Apache people. He had heard stories about them, some told with respect, others twisted with fear, but he knew better than to believe all the talk from travelers. He had seen enough of the world to understand that most stories were only half the truth. Ayanna took a slow step forward. Her movements were graceful, as if she was part of the land itself. She did not run. She did not hide. She simply looked at him with eyes that held questions but no weakness. Jack raised one hand slightly, showing he meant no harm. He wasn't sure why he did that. Maybe it was the way she carried herself or the quiet strength in her gaze. The air between them felt different, soft but charged, like the world was holding its breath. Jack cleared his throat. "Didn't mean to bother you," he said softly, though he wasn't sure if she would understand his words. She tilted her head slightly, her expression calm. It was clear that she understood more than she showed. For a moment, Jack thought she might turn away and disappear into the woods. But instead, she took another step closer to the bank. Her feet barely made a sound on the wet stones. He noticed the beads around her neck, small, carefully made, each one telling a story. Her dark hair moved with the wind, brushing lightly against her shoulders. Jack had spent years meeting all kinds of people, but no one had ever looked at him the way she did. There was no fear in her eyes, no judgment, only quiet strength. It unsettled him in a way he couldn't explain. He looked around carefully, making sure no one else was nearby. He was on Apache land and he knew enough to be respectful, but part of him also felt something else, something like curiosity, a pull he couldn't ignore. Ayanna finally spoke, her voice soft but steady. Her English was slow, shaped by her own language, but clear enough to understand. "You are far from your home," she said. Jack nodded slightly. "Yeah," he answered. "I guess I am." She studied him for a long moment, as if she could read more than what his words told. Then she said, "This river is not a place for hunters." The words touched something inside him. She didn't say it with anger. It was a quiet truth, spoken by someone who knew the land far better than he ever could. Jack wanted to say he wasn't there to cause trouble, that he was just passing through, but the words felt small compared to the way she said it. "I'm not here to take anything," he said instead. "Just following a trail." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked down at the river, then back at him. Jack realized she wasn't just a woman standing by the water. She was someone with her own purpose, her own path. The air grew warmer as the sun climbed higher. The shadows under the trees began to shrink. Jack knew he should keep moving. The men he was looking for were somewhere ahead. But something about this moment made him stay a little longer. He had spent years on the road, but this was different. This was not just another stop on the trail. It felt like the beginning of something he couldn't name. Ayanna slowly walked back toward the trees, but she didn't turn away completely. She looked over her shoulder once more, her dark eyes meeting his. Then she disappeared into the shade like a quiet breeze. Jack stood there for a moment, unsure of what to think. He had come here to hunt down outlaws, not to meet someone who could silence the noise inside him with just a look. The sound of the river felt different now, softer, like it carried a secret he hadn't learned yet. He untied his horse and climbed back into the saddle. As Dusty began to move again, Jack looked at the spot where she had stood. He didn't know her name, her story, or why she was there. But he knew this. Something inside him had shifted. It was small, quiet, but real. He rode on slowly, the path ahead stretching into the unknown. But now the land didn't feel as empty as it had that morning. The river's sound followed him like a soft memory, and the image of the woman with the proud eyes stayed with him. Jack didn't know it yet, but this meeting would change the road ahead. He had set out to find men who had broken the law. Instead, he had found someone who would break through the walls he had built around his heart. Jack rode for a long time with the sound of the river echoing in his ears, and the picture of the woman lingering in his mind. The trail he had been following still lay before him, a thin line of prints and signs that a patient eye could read. But his heart felt different now, like a door had opened and a soft wind had moved through it. He tried to shake the feeling and focus on the work at hand. Yet every time the path curved near a stand of cottonwoods or a bend in the water, he found himself looking for a glimpse of her. Late in the afternoon, he came to a clearing with a small rise of sand and stones. From there he could see the land stretch for miles, a quilt of pale grass and scattered shrubs. Dusty, his horse, flicked its ears as if listening to something far away. Jack pulled the reins gently and let the horse stop. He lifted the brim of his hat and scanned the horizon. The prints he had followed were faded, as if the earth itself was shrugging them off. He wondered if he had lost the trail completely, Then he saw movement in the shadow of a mesquite tree. It was not large or loud. It was gentle, like a leaf turning in a breeze. Ayanna stepped into the light, her hair lifted by the wind, her eyes as steady as before. Jack felt a calm he could not explain. He raised his hand in greeting. She answered with a small nod. "You keep riding," she said, "but the trail is not where you think." Jack slid down from the saddle. "I'm guessing you know these lands better than I ever will." Ayanna walked closer, her steps soft over the sand. "I know the paths that are safe. I know the paths that are not." She paused and her gaze moved across the far hills. "The men you follow do not see what the land is telling them." "You do," Jack smiled a little. "Sometimes the land speaks slow. Sometimes I listen even slower." Ayanna's mouth curved with the hint of a smile, and Jack felt a small bloom of warmth at the sight. She knelt by a faint print near a rock and pointed. They turned. "Not here, there." She traced a line in the sand toward a shallow ridge. "They tried to hide their path, but they do not know the small things that give them away." Jack crouched beside her. The mark she showed was tiny, only the edge of a heel and a scuff where a stone had been pushed aside. He would have missed it. He was not too proud to say so. "Thank you," he said simply. Ayanna stood and looked at his horse. "You ride well, but there are places where a horse makes too much sound." "Walk from here," Jack nodded. He took Dusty's reins and started on foot beside Ayanna. The quiet between them was not empty. It was gentle and full, like the hush of a sunrise. They moved past the mesquite tree and up the ridge, following signs only she seemed to notice. A broken blade of grass, a patch of sand brushed by a hurried step. The faint crease where a weight had pressed into the earth and then lifted again. As the light softened toward evening, the air cooled and the sky took on rosy colors. They came upon a cluster of small stones laid in a circle. Ayanna stopped. "We do not pass here without asking," she said softly. Jack lowered his head in respect. "Teach me how to ask." Ayanna knelt, touched the earth with her fingertips, and whispered a few words. The sound was low and musical, like water over smooth rocks. Jack did not understand the language, but he understood the feeling: gratitude, care, and a promise to walk lightly. He did the same, touching his hand to the ground and offering a quiet thanks in his own way. They moved on, and soon they came to a shallow canyon where the rocks glowed gold with the last light of day. Ayanna led him to a place where the path narrowed. "They are near," she said, "but you cannot go to them as a hunter." "Not here," Jack breathed slowly. "Then how?" "Talk," Ayanna said. "Wait, let the land work." She looked at him closely, her eyes searching his face as if she were reading a page. "You are not here only for them." Jack felt the truth of that deep and clear. "I thought I was," he said. "But then I met you." They waited as the sky turned from gold to deep blue. Stars began to show one by one like small fires in the distance. The night was gentle, and the wind carried a hint of the river's sweetness. Ayanna gathered dry twigs and leaves and made a tiny fire that barely rose above her palm. It was more a glow than a flame, a quiet warmth to soften the dark. She shared a piece of flatbread and a handful of roasted corn with Jack. He offered dried apples from his saddlebag. They ate in easy silence, listening to the night. Ayanna told Jack that she was searching too. Not for the same men, but for answers. Some strangers had passed near her community and something had gone missing. A bundle of woven cloth made by her mother's hands. The cloth held a story stitched in color and pattern. It was not valuable to traders, but it was precious to Ayanna's people. It carried memories. It carried names. She followed the whispers of where it had gone, which drew her to this same corner of land. Jack looked at the soft light in her eyes when she spoke of her mother's weaving. He felt a tug in his chest. "If we find your cloth, that matters more than any reward to me," he said. Ayanna held his gaze. "You say that in a good way." "I believe you." They slept in turns, taking care to keep the small fire low. When dawn came, the sky was a pale wash of silver and pink. The air felt clean. Ayanna and Jack set out again, moving down a narrow wash where the sand kept their steps quiet. As the sun climbed, they heard a new sound. The hush of voices carried on the wind like the sea in a shell. Ayanna raised her hand and they stopped. "There," she whispered, pointing to a small grove. They did not rush. They circled slowly, careful not to break twigs or send stones rolling. Jack guided Dusty to a shady spot and looped the reins where the horse could rest. Then he and Ayanna approached the grove from the side, where low bushes offered cover. Through the leaves, Jack saw 3 men around a small camp. They looked tired. One of them held a cup of coffee, blowing at the steam. Another was mending a boot. At the center of their camp, on a flat stone, lay a folded cloth with threads that glimmered in morning light. Ayana's breath caught, quiet but full of feeling. "My mother's work," she whispered. Jack put a gentle hand near hers, not touching, only close. "We will ask for it back," he said. "We will do it right." Ayana nodded. No loud words. No threats. Jack stepped out where the men could see him. His hands were open. His voice was calm. "Morning," he said. "You look like you could use more water. There's a spring not far." The men stiffened at first, unsure what to make of him, but Jack's quiet tone made the tension ease a little. Ayana stepped out beside him, her presence steady and dignified. The man with the coffee glanced from Jack to Ayana and back again. Something changed in his eyes, like a shadow lifting. "We don't want trouble," the man with the boot said. "Neither do we," Jack answered. "We came to ask for something that belongs to her community." He nodded toward the folded cloth. "That work carries a story. It needs to go home." The men looked at each other. The one holding the coffee shifted his weight. "We found it near the river. Didn't think it was worth much. We thought it was pretty." "It is pretty," Ayana said softly. "And it is important. It has names. It has blessings." The men seemed to understand, if not fully, then enough. The one with the coffee set his cup down and picked up the cloth with careful hands. He did not toss it. He did not pull at the threads. He held it out the way a person offers a small bird to the sky. "We can give it back," he said. "We are sorry." Ayana received it with the care of someone holding a memory. She closed her eyes for a moment and breathed. Then she opened them and gave the men a small nod of thanks. Jack felt the quiet relief of a door gently closing. He also felt a new warmth at how Ayana stood, strong, respectful, and kind. He turned to the men. "You were seen near a stagecoach stop," he said, keeping his voice mild. "People were afraid. I want to take you to a place where we can talk with the right folks, make things clear, and set it right. No one needs to get hurt. We can walk together." The men looked wary, but the calm in Jack's voice and the gentle way Ayana held the cloth seemed to soften the ground beneath their feet. "We don't want to run," the bootmender said. "We just want fair words." "Fair words," Jack repeated. "That's what we'll have." They broke camp slowly. Jack helped them put out the fire and scatter the ash so the land would heal. Ayana watched with quiet care, her eyes thoughtful. When they were ready, the small group walked back toward the river, where the cottonwood leaves whispered like friendly hands. The path felt less heavy than before. Ayana and Jack walked beside each other, not speaking much, but sharing the easy closeness that grows from doing something right together. By midday, they reached a small town where a few wooden buildings faced a wide dirt road. People looked up as the group approached. Jack spoke with the local guide and the elder who served as a bridge between travelers and the surrounding communities. They met in the shade of a porch where the air was cool and the light fell in soft bands across the floor. Ayana laid the folded cloth on a table and explained its meaning. Her words were steady and respectful. The elder listened closely, then touched the weaving with great care.